Welcome to Historic Battles Podcast, where we go deeper into the battles that shaped our modern world. Enjoy our first episode! The Battle of Stalingrad was one of the most pivotal and brutal battles in World War II, lasting from August 23, 1942 to February 2, 1943. This was no ordinary military encounter. Stalingrad's struggle was a devastating confrontation of endurance, strategy, and attrition that reshaped the course of WW2. Today, we'll explore how this battle began, the strategic approaches taken by both the Soviet Union and Nazi Germany, the staggering losses on each side, and why Stalingrad is remembered as a major turning point in the war. Let's go back to the summer of 1942. Nazi Germany, led by Adolf Hitler, was deep into its invasion of the Soviet Union under Operation Barbarossa, which had begun in 1941. Hitler's initial campaign achieved rapid victories, and his forces captured vast Soviet territories. By mid-1942, he had a new objective: seize the Soviet oil fields in the Caucasus and secure Stalingrad on the Volga River. This was strategic on multiple fronts. First, Stalingrad was a critical industrial hub for the Soviets, producing tanks, aircraft, and munitions vital to the Red Army. Controlling it would cut Soviet supply lines and allow German forces to advance into the oil-rich Caucasus, crucial for fueling the German war machine. Second, for Hitler, Stalingrad held immense symbolic value because of its name. Capturing a city named after Stalin himself would be a huge psychological victory, demoralizing the Soviets. And so, in August 1942, the German Sixth Army, commanded by General Friedrich Paulus, began its advance on Stalingrad, launching one of the deadliest urban battles in military history. The Soviet Union quickly realized the importance of defending Stalingrad, both strategically and symbolically. Joseph Stalin issued the famous Order No. 227, known as Not One Step Back. This order forbade retreat under any circumstances, meaning Soviet soldiers had to defend Stalingrad at all costs. Stalin's message was clear: Stalingrad could not and would not fall. Soviet Commander Vasily Chuikov, charged with defending the city, had to adopt unconventional tactics. Instead of positioning his forces in traditional defensive lines, Chuikov embraced brutal urban combat to his advantage. This strategy forced German troops into close-quarters fighting, what came to be known as Rattenkrieg, or rat warfare. The city itself became a battlefield, with soldiers engaging each other at close range in destroyed buildings, factories, and underground sewers. Soviet snipers, including the famous Vasily Zaitsev, targeted German officers, causing chaos and fear among German forces. The Red Army also created fortified strongpoints and buildings throughout the city, forcing the Germans to fight for every street and every room. Chuikov's strategy was simple but effective: turn the Germans' own strength against them. As the Germans moved deeper into Stalingrad, their supply lines stretched thinner, and their forces became exhausted by this grinding, relentless warfare. The German strategy, meanwhile, relied heavily on overwhelming firepower and speed. General Paulus was determined to capture Stalingrad quickly, expecting the Soviet forces to collapse under pressure as they had in previous battles. German forces used intense bombing campaigns by the Luftwaffe to reduce much of Stalingrad to rubble, hoping to break Soviet morale. By October, Paulus's forces had managed to capture around 90% of the city. Hitler, confident in a swift victory, ordered Paulus to hold his position, even sending reinforcements to ensure the city's complete capture. However, as winter approached, German morale began to waver. Stalingrad's rubble-strewn streets neutralized the Germans' technological and mobility advantages, and they found themselves bogged down in a protracted and costly engagement. Hitler's insistence on capturing Stalingrad at any cost led to one fatal mistake. He neglected to adequately protect the flanks of the German forces, where weaker Romanian and Italian divisions were positioned. Soviet commanders saw this vulnerability and began preparations for a massive counteroffensive. On November 19, 1942, the Soviet Union launched Operation Uranus, a meticulously planned counteroffensive that aimed to encircle the German Sixth Army. The Soviets attacked both the northern and southern flanks of the German position, which were defended by Romanian forces. Within days, the Soviet armies overwhelmed these weaker units, breaking through and quickly encircling the entire Sixth Army inside Stalingrad. This encirclement trapped over 300,000 Axis soldiers. Hitler, refusing to consider retreat, ordered Paulus to hold Stalingrad, expecting the Luftwaffe to supply the 6th Army by air. But the airlift operation failed to deliver enough food, ammunition, or medical supplies, and German soldiers began to suffer immensely as winter deepened. Starvation, frostbite, and Soviet artillery fire took a devastating toll on the trapped soldiers. By December, any hope of German victory was gone, yet Hitler refused to allow Paulus to surrender. The Red Army continued to tighten its grip, and by late January 1943, Paulus, now promoted to Field Marshal by Hitler as an incentive not to surrender, was left with no other option. On January 31, 1943, Paulus surrendered to the Soviet forces, marking the end of the Battle of Stalingrad on February 2nd. This was a monumental defeat for Nazi Germany. Of the 300,000 Axis soldiers trapped in Stalingrad, only 91,000 remained alive to be taken as prisoners of war, and only around 5,000 would eventually return to Germany. The Soviets celebrated this victory as a turning point and a symbol of Soviet resilience. The loss of the 6th Army crippled German morale and resources on the Eastern Front. The cost of Stalingrad was staggering. On the German side, an estimated 800,000 men were killed, wounded, or captured, representing a massive portion of Hitler's forces on the Eastern Front. The Soviet Union also paid an enormous price, with around 1.1 million Soviet soldiers and civilians killed or wounded, and nearly the entire city of Stalingrad left in ruins. Despite these losses, the Soviets' determination ultimately paid off, and their ability to replace manpower outpaced Germany's ability to recover. Stalingrad's impact on WWII was profound. Until Stalingrad, Nazi Germany's forces had been virtually unstoppable, advancing with rapid success. But the loss at Stalingrad shattered this momentum.